Okay, let's move to our next presentation, Harsha by Harsha Kadimisetty, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer with Aerchain. After his engineering degree in BITS Pilani, Harsha joined Bosch, where he handled sales in India and international market. His stint in Bosch helped him understand the procurement process of various organizations, and this led him to build his first startup, Supply Basis, which focused on aggregating indirect procurement for manufacturing enterprises in India. Can we welcome Harsha with a big round of applause?
We have done this, I think, UBS forums, we've been a part of for the last 3 sessions as well. We've done it in Delhi, we have done it in Mumbai, but Bangalore is our home ground. And you know, it's a pleasure to see a lot of known faces in here, and feels good to be conversing with you all. So I'm Harsha. I take care of everything on business at Aerchain. We are an autonomous procurement platform, and we are in the market for the last 4 years. Today, I want to highlight or talk about one specific topic, which is something on the move, on the rise, which is new to a lot of us, the journey towards autonomous sourcing, right? This is primarily about, you know, what do we do as procurement before the price and the vendor is finalized. That's the area. Because once the price and vendor is finalized, right, we all have been using a lot of P2P systems, workflow-based automations. Most of us have already experienced it. Most of us have known some challenges. They're trying to solve it using RPA, using multiple other things. So this is an area where predominantly the digitization has been a little less. It's been a little backward. So I wanted to touch about what is this all about, autonomous sourcing? Why is it required in the first place? And what is the path to achieve that? And what do we need to do as procurement teams to reach that particular path, right? So autonomous sourcing is trying to learn from your data, from your users, to ensure you're buying right goods and services at the right price from the right suppliers every single time. That's the ultimate objective of it. Right now, we are all doing it. We have very competent teams across different categories trying to manage all of this. What is the need for autonomous sourcing? It's about sustaining all the savings, all the strategies, what we as category managers are doing in different categories. Even when, say, I'm an expert in packaging or someone else is expert in, let's say, food commodities. Even if I move to a different category, even if I move to a different organization, how do we sustain all the best practices for, let's say, the next few decades to come across? That's where retaining this or capturing all of these data points in the system and ensuring it is a lot more sustainable, scalable. And you know, even if I'm not there, the system is taking care of it or guiding the users to more a fresher joining in, let's say, my organization. How can he manage the same? That's the need for autonomous sourcing to sustain all of the savings, right? Today, most of the organizations are somewhere in between, let's say, traditional practices and digital workflows, right, in their sourcing practices. I would say less than 1% of the organizations today are trying to reach the state of autonomous sourcing. And how we have been able to get here, understand, you know, what it takes to be there is from those 1% customers who are actually looking to move above and beyond in terms of what is that they can do. Right? How do they use data? How do they use AI ML to ensure, you know, autonomous sourcing? We have learned from our experiences working with the likes of some of you and trying to see how we can do what we can do to achieve this. So broadly, if I have to strategize this particular journey, traditional is all about doing it offline, getting the quotes, doing the negotiations completely offline. Now digital, we have some auction tools or, you know, RFX tools which are being used, but being used only for ensuring, you know, data exchange is being happening with the suppliers, but everything else is happening again offline. So from here we start wherever you are, and let's say in terms of collecting the data points from your S2Ps, from your ERPs, from your P2P solutions, from external indexes or any other intelligence platforms, whether it is supplier risk platforms, it is commodity intelligence, so on and so forth. How do you integrate all of the data into a single platform where the data is presented to you at the time you are acting upon, on which supplier to choose, how do I allocate my business among the available suppliers, and whether it is risky enough for me to have 1 or 2 suppliers. So partial automation is all about making sure you're visualizing all of the data in a single place, connecting all of it, and helping your users to take data-backed decisions at all points in time. On top of, once you have all the data, then you put in your business rules specific to your industry and your specific company. Because working with, let's say, hundreds of customers so far, what we have understood is same industry, same geography, two customers have a different strategy in the way they want to manage their procurement, right? We all do. So how do you apply your business rules to ensure some of the activities in your source to pay cycles or source to contract cycles are automated? And finally, the stage of autonomous sourcing is with a combination of the data and, let's say, the business rules what you have, how does they all keep learning from each other? How do they keep learning every single day? And becoming better, retaining that intelligence, providing that intelligence to ensure the decisions are being taken as much as possible by the system or with the help of human augmenting, right? So that's the ideal stage. Now, why have we not been able to reach there so far? I mean, we have been using, we have been hearing AI ML for the last few years as well, right? But nothing really came into, live use cases or examples which we have all leveraged upon. One of the most important or the key parameters is that the data is not available. While in other industries, we are seeing autonomous cars, we are seeing, Elon Musk coming up with some robots in the market. Multiple other industries, the data is being collected to ensure this AI is actually meaning something to the end users, helping them in what they want. So one of the biggest problems, at least our experience has been the data is not in a way which can be leveraged or which can use for automation tomorrow. That's one of the biggest underlying problems in the overall procurement space, what we have realized. How do you ensure the right data is being captured the right way at the right time? That is the key. And how do you achieve that? That's where I want to take this presentation into, in terms of how do we collect the data. That is step one towards any automation we look at, right? Whether it is RPA or whether it is autonomous sourcing. So moving here, this is a broad cycle in terms of from the time a requirement comes till the time it is awarded to the right vendor, right? There are multiple steps in this. And this is how we see most of the organizations are currently doing it, either offline, on Excels, on emails. And these are the only places, right, where they're using some sort of digitization in terms of sending and receiving the data. So how do you ensure this data collection at every single step is very easy so that automation is happening or intelligence is actually being built up? So coming back one by one, in terms of collecting the requirements, most of the cases the requirements comes on a age-old catalog or let's say in an offline file in a free text format. So how do you make sense of that particular thing? How do you make the intake process, the user submitting the requirements, how do you make it so easy? How do you guide the users to the right goods and services across the market, taking it to them on their existing platforms like let's say Slack, Teams we all use today. How do you take technology to them? Or even let's say we are talking about as simple as bearing intakes, guiding them towards the right bearing, towards large construction projects where there are complex services being done. How do you guide them to the right goods and the services in the technology of their choice? Like take the technology to their platforms which they're comfortable with, make sure the data is coming in very simple, very easily, and reduce the resistance, right? That's the key towards any data collection process, reduce the resistance. So this is one of the things which we believe taking technology to their existing sources in their way which they are used to helps us collect the data from the time when the requirement has actually started. And analyzing this particular data, I mean, there are a lot of other things, right? Predicting these data points, especially in tail spend. We have seen there are hundreds of thousands of requirements which come every year. Now, how do you predict? All of these are done on the last day of the requirement. I needed it yesterday. So how do you predict those requirements? Let's say, hey, in the next 15 days, these are all the things which are expected to come based on your historical buying trends, what we have seen for the last 5 years or 10 years. Why don't you be prepared for this? So doing something like, preparing the users, the end users, whatever production departments, maintenance departments, or let's say any admin departments, right? Preempting that this is what you're expected to get to in the next 15 days, next 30 days, and ensuring the demand forecast is done for all of those items before it actually becomes an emergency. This is one of other areas where you can enable the end users to make it a lot more easier for them to submit their requirements, right? Then coming across, you have a lot of I mean, even today we see a lot of buyers having their a lot of analysis which they've done on different vendors, what has been my experience, what is this across, who is the right vendor at this point in time, doing across. So if you are able to collect that particular data in a way where system is able to automate the inquiry, I mean, finding those right vendors, sending across those inquiries at the right time, and how do you suggest, instead of buying these sporadically, can we consolidate all of them into a contract instead of buying them one by one, right? How can the system suggest the sourcing automation, not just as a singular requirement, but why don't you get into a contract for these consolidated set of requirements with these consolidated set of suppliers? Category intelligence is very important for us to be able to achieve this. And then the next thing is, use the RFX to collect the data which is required, meaning most of the cases, what we see is any complex requirement goes as an attachment in your RFP tool. That attachment is sent, that is downloaded, vendor fills in whatever is required, that is attached back again to the portal, and you download all of these details, do the analysis offline, so on and so forth. Because the structures are complex, the requirements are complex for every single category, they are different for every category. How do you make it as easy as we do it on Excel? That is a key wherein collecting all of the data and not isolatedly lying in one particular Excel sheet makes a difference. So how do you get the convenience of the complexity of an Excel, bringing into the simplicity of a technological platform, which ensures the collection of all of the data, not only from your organization. Let's think about the vendors, right? Vendors today hate using any of the procurement tools, right? That's been one of the biggest bottlenecks for us, and especially in a country like India, we are like, let's say, a little behind US or any other developed countries, right? Adoption from the suppliers is a big challenge. We are speaking about farmers being some of the suppliers, scrap vendors being some of the suppliers, anyone, any mom and pop store who would not be very comfortable, even though if you give them a mobile app, they're not very comfortable. How do you take them? How do you enable to work in their own platforms like, WhatsApp? Today, most of the, like, let's say, agri-commodity vendors, they submit their bids on WhatsApp. They have individual groups created on WhatsApp where the price discussions and finalizations are happening. How do you enable them to submit their bids? There are some customers of ours today, they do price inquiries for certain commodities twice a day across all the locations of India. So how do you do that process on WhatsApp, collecting the bid, doing a continuous auction process on WhatsApp? That is taking technology to their platforms, or how do you enable a vendor to submit their quotes on an Excel, let the system do the heavy lifting on all of it. Making it easy for the vendor because I think there are about 500 tools in the overall procure-tech industry today. Vendor has to get used to almost all of those procurement tools. It's a mammoth task, it's a mammoth change management task, which is difficult to achieve. So how do you make the supplier change management negligible? Take technology to their platform, ensure the participation is coming in very simple, and then you have the data coming into the system digitally, which you could use it for further downstream process of, how do you evaluate, let's say, with multiple end users, whether it's projects teams or any other team, how do you get them onto a platform? Today, I mean, I've been hearing a lot of people, even today who I've been speaking to, they use Teams very extensively, or they use, let's say, a Slack or an internal collaboration tool very extensively. How do you connect your technology stack to the collaboration tools and enable that rating mechanism to be as simple as we do it on Swiggy after an order, or Dunzo we would want to tip something because we are very happy. How do you make the evaluation process on each one of this as simple as the collaboration of each one of those requirements in their existing platforms? That's also a key to get better participation from the users, because as procurement teams, we are enablers for all of the business. All of the departments are our internal customers. How do we make their life simple so that my life becomes eventually simpler, right? How do you make it as simple as possible? And the last thing is, this is the analysis part, very critical in terms of, I have so many options. My end user has these preferences. My legal team has these preferences. Me as procurement has, some other sort of preferences. How do you model all of those scenarios, all of those preferences into a single model, and the system calculates all of those outcomes, hey, with all of your constraints, conditions, this is the way in which you should allocate your business to satisfy everyone's needs. So that's about scenario modeling. Because the data is already there in the system, putting those conditions and filters as simple as we do it on Excel sheet becomes a lot more easier. And then final step is about negotiation, which is one of our favorite topics, which we do almost every single day, right? How do you ensure external data points from the market, commodity or the risk. How do you enable, let's say, internal data points on how is this particular category buyer negotiated with this vendor at this value at this time of the year? Why don't I use this and say, hey, this is how much I'll have to buy this at? How can the system guide the users on, predicting those right prices? These are the areas which we believe can make it a lot more easier and finally see the use cases across each one of this. And one of the core issues is there is no one size fits all, right? Forget about industry, forget about company. Every category needs a specialized way to handle it. So how do you handle more complex strategies versus more tail-end strategies? There has to be a strategy and there has to be a digital strategy to handle this in an autonomous way. So how do you enable that for different categories? What are the tools and what are the problems in each category? Identifying them. What are the combination of techniques and deployments which you'll have to do for each of the category and make that a scalable template to make it a lot more easier, scalable, sustainable would be the way forward. Current systems are rigid and we'll have to look for, let's say, more flexible solutions which can accommodate most of the category needs. That's where the next generation procurement tools, many of us are there already in this particular event, trying to achieve some category management for each of the category on ensuring that you're getting the right goods and services at the right prices every single time, right? So I end my presentation here. Would love to explain in terms of, how is that we are trying to do it, what is that we are trying to do in each one of these categories, in each one of these areas, what we have seen separately. But would love to, leave it open for questions on any of the areas which you think was useful or, you think you're planning some automation or, having some issues there. Would leave it open for questions, guys.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. A quick one, yes. Sorry, can you? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll get the mic for you. Just one second.
If you can double click on dynamic negotiation intelligence.
Yes, sir. Right. The dynamic negotiation intelligence, like I'll explain it with an example. One of the things is there are prices are fluctuating every single week this time. No supplier is trying to give us fixed rates for more than a month, sometimes even a week. So in these volatile conditions, how do you enable, because you'll have to do this continuously every single time, right? So how do you enable real-time feedback to the vendor based on that particular days, collecting data points from external worlds? And when you collect those data points, let's say the commodity price or let's say the logistics price, do the cost modeling of what and all goes into that particular category of yours and see how each one of those categories are fluctuating with respect to, let's say if it is energy cost, what are the fuel rates looking like? If it's a raw material cost, how are the metals fluctuating or how are the food commodities fluctuating? Try to build a cost model for your category. Collect all the external data points which are required to visualize, what the should be cost of yours should be, and build in a negotiation model also within the platform where the vendors are being given dynamic feedback without you having to go. So the initial stages of negotiation will be done without even the buyer coming in. The buyer comes in at the last step once he has seen how the patterns have happened. And the more you negotiate with the vendor, the more proactive you are with the vendors, the better you are likely to achieve, the expected outcome, what you want, the gap, what we are talking about, right? So how do you make this all dynamic? How do you keep proactive feedbacks to the suppliers on each one of it? And without doing any calculations, Excel sheets and other things, how do you keep your up-to-date information of this is how negotiation in this particular category works? It could be a ZBCs, it could be, we call it clean sheet models. How do you enable? So on top of that, how do you enable your negotiation strategy to ensure you're getting the best price? That is dynamic negotiation intelligence. Works beautifully across different categories where there is dynamicity in the pricing of each one of those things which we buy.
I guess, thanks Harsha, nice presentation.
Thank you.
I guess most of the commodity products you are trying to do this, right? How about seasonal products? For example, in apparel, every season the products are changing. Have you ever tried it? I worked with VF company for almost more than a decade. I've tried this kind of automation or autonomous, whatever is supposed to do it. but we always found it difficult in terms of seasonal products.
Correct. So, in that particular case, we have come across not only in apparel, let's say in some other industries where demand supply drives the prices overall. We frankly have not been able to do that so far, but it's about having a logic and having the data available for that. What are the data points which are causing the fluctuation in the prices for me? For your case, it is seasonality, meaning the demand supply gap for that. So can we can we capture those data points as the first question, and can we build a logic with those data points to predict the price what we have? If these two, since I do not have that real-time experience, perhaps if we are able to answer these two things, then it is definitely possible to do it even for an apparel industry, let's say. But beyond that, I do not have a real case study for that.
No worries.